Yalta Conference, with Premier Stalin representing Soviet Russia, was designed to set the post-war pattern. Wartime Prime Minister Winston Churchill spoke for Great Britain, and the Big Three was completed by the late President Roosevelt for the United States. Nazi Germany was collapsing in defeat, and at Yalta the victors planned for peace to come. Soviet Russia gained large concessions and gave pledges in return. Then later at San Francisco, the United Nations was formed, signing for us American Secretary of State Stettinius in the presence of President Truman. High hopes of a world organized for peace. For Soviet Russia, Gromyko, though the Soviets insisted on a big power veto. Russian adherence to the United Nations was applauded, and President Truman, addressing the conference, expressed the American view.
No one nation, no regional group can or should expect any special privilege which harms any other nation.
The Polish election was a test. The Soviets pledged a free democratic election in Poland. There was wrangling and delay, and when the election was finally held, it was a totalitarian affair staged by a Red dictatorship. Red Marshal Tito established a communist dictatorship in Yugoslavia. Unarmed American transport planes were shot down by Tito's fighter planes. An international crisis. Yugoslavia, an example of communist despotism behind the Iron Curtain. Riots in Trieste, which great seaport Yugoslavia claimed from Italy. An early violent trouble spot in the post-war picture. In Greece, a more dangerous crisis. Civil war developed. Greek government troops trying to suppress red guerrilla bands, aided by Soviet satellite countries Yugoslavia, Albania, Bulgaria, bringing about the Truman policy of aiding Greece and Turkey too against red aggression. Hungarian Premier Nagy, whose democratic government was overthrown by the communists, a culminating violation of Soviet pledges of democratic liberties. The exiled premier's son was held as a hostage. In the United Nations, a series of crises, proceedings under the threat of Soviet obstruction. The Chinese delegate in the Iranian crisis called for a vote, and the majority was against Soviet Russia. This majority verdict by the Security Council of the World Organization was rejected by the Soviet delegate. Gromyko staging his famous walkout. This scene was a starter for continuing drama of Soviet obstruction, which featured the veto. Spain, the decision of the majority on the Security Council was overridden repeatedly, Soviet Russia casting 3 vetoes in quick succession. Later, the question of a Balkan investigation was to bring the number of a total up to 11. 11 Soviet vetoes in less than 2 years of United Nations history. The all-important problem, the atomic bomb, and Special American Delegate Bernard Baruch presented the American proposal for outlawing atomic warfare.
We are here to make a choice between the quick and the dead. That is our business. The United States proposes the creation of an international atomic development authority, to which should be entrusted all phases of the development and use of atomic energy, starting with the raw material and including 1, managerial control or ownership of all atomic energy activities potentially dangerous to world security. 2, power to control, inspect, and license all other atomic activities.
The American atomic plan had the support of a Security Council majority, the delegate from China stating,
"My government is in full accord with the United States proposal that," quoting, "there must be no veto to protect those who violate their solemn agreements not to develop or use atomic energy for destructive purposes," unquote.
Soviet Russia to date has blocked atomic control, insisting on the right to veto measures to keep nations, including Soviet Russia, from making atomic bombs. The atomic horror that blasted Hiroshima is the world menace. America refuses to concede the right of any nation to veto the prevention of this. Moscow Conference of the Foreign Ministers of the Big Four. American Secretary of State Marshall and Soviet Foreign Minister Molotov at the parley that failed. Foreign Secretary Bevin of Britain. This was an attempt to draft German and Austrian peace treaties. It ended in a deadlock between the Western democracies and the Soviet East. Returning home, Secretary Marshall declared,
"The recovery of Europe has been far slower than had been expected. Disintegrating forces are becoming evident. The patient is sinking, while the doctors deliberate."
The shattered wreckage of conquered Germany is a graphic symbol of the desperate need of reconstruction in post-war Europe, disorganization everywhere, and the menace of famine. The humanitarian aspect is urgent, and the widespread misery of people has a dangerous political meaning. In many parts of Europe, there have been outbreaks of looting, like the plundering of coal. There's a peril of chaos in the democratic nations of Western Europe. A train looted by people in frantic need. There's a threat of social breakdown and a rise of totalitarian dictatorship in countries driven to desperation by want. Breadlines, nations of the West trying to maintain their freedom, are menaced by conditions like these, the threat of wild turmoil and chaos. Bevin at the conference on the Marshall Plan, and in Paris, Molotov, invited by Britain and France, he attended the discussions of the offer made by Secretary Marshall, American help to supplement European self-help. Eager to accept, Foreign Minister Bido for France and Bevin of Britain asked the Soviets to join in European reconstruction. Recriminations and refusal, Molotov quitting the conference and denouncing the Marshall Plan. The cleavage between West and East becomes an economic division. The line of the Iron Curtain now separates Western and Soviet economic spheres as the representatives of the free nations of the West go ahead without Russia. The big powers invite all Europe to join the parley. All Soviet satellites reject, and 16 free nations take action to draft a plan of concerted self-help, this to be supplemented by American help. The United States will be informed about what the Europeans can do for themselves and what they'll need under the Marshall Plan of economic support for free nations maintaining their liberty. American resources, machinery, food, necessities to back up countries on the side of freedom.